I made a little drink. It's a strawberry acai refresher. And yeah, I just wanted a fun drink because it's summer. And even though it is storming outside right now, I just wanted a little something special while I talk to you guys. Welcome back to another video on Darling Little Writer. Today, I'm going over all the books I read during Q2 of this year. This quarter did not go as planned, and I will kind of get into that in my next video when I talk about my Q3 TBR. I just didn't hit or read all the books that I wanted to read, but you know what? That's okay. I just want to talk about the books that I actually read, because looking here, I actually did read a lot. And I'm proud of that. Now, all the books I read this quarter kind of fall into three different categories. So first we're going to start with the books that I would say the most book talky books. So let's just start off with the book that I started off reading this quarter with, and that is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. Now, I know that this book is very divisive among readers. Some people love it, some people don't. For me, I kind of understand both sides a little bit. This book, I had a little trouble getting into. It's a little different than some of her other books she's read. I loved Conversation with Friends and Normal People. I think those were her first two books that she put out. This book follows two brothers, so this is kind of the first time that two men are the protagonists, I would say. But you follow around these brothers and kind of see their life and their different love stories, I guess you could say, or romantic lives, and just kind of she kind of weaves you through their relationship and understanding just kind of the nuances of having a sibling, which, to be honest, I have no idea because I'm an only child. But it is really, I do find like family dynamics, sibling dynamics very interesting, I think, because of that. So I did enjoy that part of this book, and I will say I eventually got really into it. I think the ending is satisfying. I think I'm happy with how it ended, and I was very happy that I read the book. Once I got through it, I was like, you know what? That was a very interesting story. I think what Sally Rooney does best is just showing how complex human beings are. When she writes about different romances, it's very obvious that these romances aren't cookie cutter. They're not perfect. They're not like the kind of ideal, which is very realistic. You know, some are a little messier than others, some, or not even messy, because I don't even think that's fair to some of the situations, but maybe more complicated or just not as talked about or understood. I think that's fair to say. And I do think that she approaches these type of situations with a very interesting perspective and a very open perspective. And you're trying to decide, like, is this a reasonable situation? Is this a healthy situation? Or is it not? Because there's a lot of things about different relationships that are talked about in this book and her books that you may be like, in certain situations that may be a problem, but in other situations, if it's handled in a respectful and healthy way, maybe it's not. I don't want to dive too much further into this book. I think maybe some of that is why there's so much divisiveness, because people have strong opinions about some of the stuff she writes. But I think she is approaching like romantic stories. I don't even know if I want to say the genre of romance, but romantic stories in a very interesting way. And that is why I enjoy reading Sally Rooney, and I think I will continue to read her books. And I do really like this book, but I understand why some people don't. The next kind of viral book that I picked up is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Yes, I finally got around to reading this. And I just want to say, I'm looking at the books now. This was my favorite book I read this quarter. This is such a good book. This is completely worth the hype. It basically tells the story of this fictional Hollywood starlet, and it shows her entire career through all her marriages, because yes, she had 7 marriages, but there's an interesting twist and reason to her 7 marriages that it's such a good book. And it feels like Evelyn Hugo is a real person when you read this book. Now, I have not done a deep dive into the history of Hollywood in a long time, but as someone who is kind of a little distance removed from that, and probably the general public who doesn't know every detail of Hollywood history, this book feels like it falls into Hollywood history and how it has changed and grown throughout the decades. And it was so interesting to read. I loved it. It was so well written. And I just want to say I recommend this book. I do. I really enjoyed it. And then the last book that I read, because social media made me, not really. I've read some of her other books. Lucy Foley, I've talked about her before. I read The Paris Apartment, and I love Lucy Foley books, especially her more recent ones that follow this kind of same murder mystery format where you jump around different perspectives of like to figure out what happened. And, you know, you have the person investigating, you have the suspects, and you're just kind of constantly guessing, and there's all these twists. I really think it just makes for a fun read. And I also think that her books are great for people just wanting to start to get into kind of mystery thriller type books. I think it's a great kind of gateway into that genre personally, because as someone who has read a little bit of it but hasn't in a while and kind of wants to get back into it, I really enjoy these books. And I think a lot of other people who especially want to get into that genre and maybe just haven't explored it yet could start with this and really love it. This book in particular is about this woman who goes to live with her brother in Paris, and when she arrives, realizes that he's not there and is worried something happened to him. So she starts to kind of investigate the place he's living in and his neighbors, and she unveils all these secrets, and it's so interesting. I just really enjoy this book, and I'm excited to read her most recent book, The Midnight Feast. She also has The Hunting Party and The Guest List, which are also very similar. It has the same format. And I've read those, and those are great. So yes, this I definitely enjoyed reading. Okay, let me take a sip. Are we ready to move in to my next kind of group of books, which for this next part of the quarter, I explored, hold on, I'm trying to figure out how to position this. All right, I explored memoirs. I read a ton of memoirs this quarter. I read You Can Make This Place Beautiful by Maggie Smith, Wild by Cheryl Strayed, The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, I Would Meet You Anywhere by Susan Kyo Ito, Bodywork by Melissa Fivos. And then I also read, as kind of like an extra book, I read Dear Writer by Maggie Smith. This is more of her kind of take and advice for other writers, her writing process, and she does reference her memoir as well in this book, which was really fun to read after reading this memoir. Now, I would say that memoir is something that I'm just starting to get into. I would say that I have more so read celebrity memoirs versus memoirs by people whose names are out there, who would probably be considered public figures, but even before they wrote their memoir, but aren't as big names as probably when you originally think of a celebrity memoir. And I think it's really interesting to kind of have these types of books and stories because all these people are, I would say, like writers first. It's not just them, like their memoir isn't the only thing that they've written. They've, you know, they're skilled writers who kind of know what they're doing when they're writing a book, and or at least seem like it. And I think it's just really interesting to hear people kind of explore stories that are their own, because it's not just them, like, you know, talking about themselves, but it's a story that they know inside and out, and they get to find the most creative ways and best ways and fulfilling ways to tell it. And I think that is beautiful, and I'm really getting into memoir as a genre and really learning a lot about it. And I have gained so much respect for people who do it. Probably the most popular memoir that I have here is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. It was also made into a movie starring Reese Witherspoon. And this book is so well written. It is so worth the hype. And she just goes into so much detail. So the story is about her journey on the Pacific Crest Trail, and her hiking it with like very little, if any, experience, and following the end of her marriage and her mom dying, and her trying to kind of wrap her head around those traumatic events while going through this big journey that is just so hard on the body, on the mind. And she writes in such great detail. Everything is so interesting. It feels like you're there with her, but she's also going into these moments where she's exploring her own memories and self, and she really shows kind of her mental process of really processing her emotions and feelings about all the things that she's lived through. So I recommend that. Also, probably writers that you have heard of, Joan Didion and Maggie Smith. They have written their own memoirs. Joan Didion is writing about the year that's following the death of her husband. Maggie Smith is writing about her divorce. And both situations, sad situations, showing a lot of grief. They're just very skilled writers who show that journey very beautifully. And I think it's books that a lot of people could probably relate to. One that I really want to highlight that you probably haven't heard of is I Would Meet You Anywhere by Susan Kyo-Ito. She is someone who is adopted. This book really just shows her relationship with her birth mother and that journey that has taken her on. And I found this book so interesting. It's an experience that I know nothing about. It is different from mine, but I still found it just really interesting. I think it's a very beautiful story about someone just trying to kind of not just learn about her family and her expansive family, but also learn about herself. And I think she just writes it in a very beautiful and honest way. And then Bodywork by Melissa Febos. She's written other stuff too. This also kind of pairs as advice for writers as well. She talks a lot about kind of writing about more risque topics and how that has affected her career. And I just found that very interesting as well. Okay, one more sip. Okay. And of course, I ended the quarter while reading some Jenny Colligan, which, if you don't know, I am trying to read the entire discography of Jenny Colligan. I don't know why I started on this journey, but I have, and I'm working to finish it because she has been writing for literal decades. I think almost as long as I've been alive. I most know her for her later books and a lot of her series that she has written in like the last decade or so now. But I've been trying to go through her earlier work, which is a lot of standalone books. I have already read through her first couple books, and now I have come to these books. So these books, I feel like I really kind of understood and learned a lot more about Jenny Colligan as a writer. And I think that was great. I am interested in making videos going on a deep dive into different authors and reading their entire discography or the majority of it and kind of giving my thoughts on their kind of body of work. So let me know if you're interested in seeing that. I still have a ways to go with Jenny, but I do have a couple authors that I am catching up with. So maybe I could start making those videos. I want to be realistic, so I'm going to say in the next year. But let's get back into these books. So the first book I read by her is Working Wonders. So Jenny Colligan is a romance writer. At least that's what I know her as. So when I picked up this book, I thought I was going to read a romance. And looking at the back cover now, it definitely plays into like, oh yeah, this is a romance. Which, yes, there is romance in this book. But there's also a couple surprises that I was not expecting. The first surprise is that the protagonist is a guy, which is fine, no problem with that. I just was not expecting that because I haven't read a book by her where she has had a guy as the protagonist. Kind of the same as Sally Rooney. We're introduced to this guy, and it seems like it is going to be like a typical romance book. His wife leaves him, or maybe not his wife, but his girlfriend, his longtime girlfriend leaves him, and he gets promoted at work, and he starts to work with this, again, another consultant, like as he runs this new department, and there's all these fun side characters, and he's, it seems like he's gonna end up in this romance with this woman. And then some other stuff happens that I get very confused about until I learned that this book is based off of a King Arthur story. And then I was like, oh, okay. This is like a fantastical, mystical, magical, moonbeam ice cream kind of book. It's not all based in reality. And I kind of want to tell you more of the plot, but I don't know if I could accurately explain it the way it deserves. So I will just say this was not my favorite. I think understanding how this, like, what this book is based off of, I kind of want to read that story, that King Arthur story that's based off of, and then understand, like, okay, I get it now. But I have to say, I was very, very confused. Sorry, Jenny, but I still love you, but I thought you confused me with one of your other books, but this one, I was just like, okay. I will, if you are a fan of King Arthur, I think this is, and romance, I think this is the book for you. This book was made for you. But, and if you do want to read some of Jenny's books and you're interested in this book, go for it. There were parts that were interesting. I got through it. I think you should, like, if you're going to read this book, I think you should know what you're getting yourself into. For the King Arthur romance fans, this is for you. So let's move on to another fantastical book that I actually loved. it's more of the realm of like the weird situation type plot that you would find in an early 2000s rom-com, and that is The Boy I Loved Before. So basically this book is this around 30-year-old woman goes to her friend's wedding, her best friend's wedding, and she's having an internal crisis, and in kind of just this moment of confusion and stress, she wishes she was 16 again. And lo and behold, she becomes 16 again by waking up the next day. Except this is not her going back in time to when she was 16. This is her being 16 in the present day. So she has aged backwards along with her parents. And the majority of people don't remember her adult self except for a select few. Now, if you can wrap your head around that plot, I think you would really enjoy this book. It's a little out there, but it's so much fun to read. And Jenny really does go into explore this type of plot in ways that I really wouldn't have thought of and that I found really interesting. I think that adds to the story and makes it a little bit more complex. And I just really enjoyed that. I know there's a lot of movies out there where women or like girls will wish that they were older. And I know there's like 17 Again with Matthew Perry, rest in peace, and Zac Efron, where their character ages back to 17. But this book really does kind of explore like the realities of that idea. And I found this so interesting and so much fun to read, and I recommend it. I think this was just like a hidden gem that I just loved. So for Jenny Colligan fans who love her more recent books, I'm talking the Little Beach Street Bakery, I'm talking Meet Me in the Cupcake Cafe, I'm talking Bookstore on the Corner. Some of her work that is very quintessential to who I think she is as an author, the type of stories that she has written that really is her thing. This book, I think, is what started that idea that she grew into all those series. It shows the little like seeds that were planted of what's to come. And that's why this book was so much fun to read. It is Where Have All the Boys Gone? And basically the idea, first, let me explain kind of for those who haven't read her other series. A lot of her later work follows the formula of a woman in her late 20s, early 30s, basically having to start over in life. She has left a long-term relationship. She lost her job, and she decides to move to a new neighborhood, new city, new country, and just start over. And she ends up starting her own business, her own little small business. She makes friends with everyone in town and finds community. She falls in love with the love of her life. And it's such a fun story. It's such a fun frame for a story. And this book, because I've read now her other books that have come before, this one is kind of where that idea starts. So this book does not follow that structure completely. The main character, she's not in a relationship at the beginning. She's single. She also doesn't quit her job. She does move from London to this small Scottish town because she is a marketing consultant, and she is going up there to help this basically parks department. And she takes her best friend, who is, I guess, going through a breakup. So there's that. And they go up and they live there for some time. I forget how long. And then, they meet these men and they fall in love, and there's a love triangle. There's, haters to lovers, like all these different tropes, right? At the beginning of the book, when they're in London, there's this kind of idea planted that there are no boys left, or no eligible men, eligible bachelors left in London. I guess there's like a news article that comes out that the male population is decreasing. And so this kind of starts like a conversation when they're out one night about this. And then they kind of mirror that because this town they go to in Scotland has all the men, and there's a very small like population of women up there, which they end up kind of using in the marketing campaign to help get support for this small town. And I just thought that was a very interesting idea. I think this book does stand on its own as its own story that I enjoyed reading. But I also have to say, for any Jenny Colgan fans, if you have read her other series, I do recommend just reading this book because it is so fun to see where all those ideas really came from. And then the last book is West End Girls, which I also loved, which was also just a fun read. It's about these twins who are kind of in their late 20s, I would say. But they are still living at home with their mom, and they're like of a lower class, and their dad wasn't really in the picture in their life. But they hear from their grandmother on their dad's side, who invites them to live in her flat in Chelsea, which is this really kind of rich neighborhood in London. And she wants them to live there because she's currently in either a hospital or like a long-term care facility, because they kind of talk about it a little bit, but she's suffering from dementia, so she can't really be on her own, live on her own anymore. But she loves her flat, she loves everything in it, so she doesn't want to get rid of it yet, so she wants someone there to take care of it. So they go to live there, and they both get jobs, and they kind of start this new life for themselves. They both have, you know, a love story of sorts, and of course the twins are complete opposite personalities, so you kind of get that fun juxtaposition. But yeah, I just really enjoyed this book. I think this book also kind of plants seeds into little nuggets that you find in her later books, and so I'm really excited that I'm getting to the point of her discography where you start to see kind of all these things connect, and I think that's just so fun. But those are all the books that I have read this quarter. So I hope you enjoyed hearing what I had to read. Maybe you found some books that you want to check out. Maybe you've read some of the books that I read here and you have your own opinions about. I would love to hear them. Feel free to leave a comment down below. I will try and be back with another video. I want to tell you guys all about my plans for Q3. So keep an eye out for that. And again, thank you so much for watching. Bye.